Um, I guess I'll see if I can finish up as quickly as possible tonight. We were getting close to the end last week, so hopefully we'll be done with this chapter that doesn't seem to want to end. I think it's just the subject matter that I'm not real keen on it. You have to talk about a lot of things that are not very pleasant, I suppose. We keep seeing the impact of the so-called sexual revolution. I guess they were successful back then. It's gone a lot farther these days than I think that they had ever promised. But that's the way it is. That's the way sin is. It starts out as it sounds almost reasonable, and then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and it keeps mutating, and the bar is always raised, the goalposts are always moved, and now we're reaping the reward, reaping what's been sown, as far as the sexual immorality is concerned. Unfortunately, it's not the perverts that started all of this business. It's the young kids now that are paying the price for these deviants and the things that they have brought on towards us. I don't know if you saw there was an interview with Elon Musk, little snippet that was making the rounds the other day. He was doing an interview with Jordan Peterson. I wish Jordan wouldn't interrupt as much as he does. I wish he'd just let Elon talk, because it was very heartfelt back and forth. And I feel like Elon really was pouring his heart out, and Jordan was just kind of treating it a little more mechanically than he should have. But if you didn't see that, Elon said that years ago he had a son. Well, I guess he technically still has a son named Xavier. And he said that he thought his son was homosexual. He said, I knew from the age of 4. Now, I would disagree with all of that, of course. But he said, I knew when he was 4 years old, because he liked to dress up and he liked Broadway or whatever. That's the kind of stuff the kids grow out of, And I can tell you that, and you probably have seen that kind of thing firsthand with your own kids. I know I've seen a big divergence, especially recently, with my kids and the kind of things that they're interested in. They've diverged quite a bit. They used to be interested in the same things. They did everything together when they were much younger, but now they have different interests because one's a boy, one's a girl, and that's just the way that God has set it up. And so he said, I had a son, and I got talked into signing off on these drugs that are supposedly gender bending. They're supposed to be turn your boys into girls, girls into boys, the hormone replacement therapy or whatever it is. He said that I thought that was the way to go. They all talked me into it. They said this is what I should do, and I signed off on it. And he said, now my son, not literally is dead, but he said my son is dead for all intents and purposes. I don't have that son anymore. That son is lost to me. So he is dead in a sense. And he said, and once I realized what had been done, that had been tricked, basically, is I believe the way he put it. He said, I made a vow at that point that I was going to destroy the woke mind virus, as he calls it. So I thought, that's rather poignant, and it explains a lot of what he's been doing lately, at least in his own way. He may not be doing it the way everybody else would do it. Everybody's an armchair quarterback. Everybody's a Monday morning quarterback, and they think, it's not perfect. So, but I don't care that it's not perfect. It's progress in the right direction. So I appreciate, what he has done with social media. We wouldn't know a lot of things if it weren't for the fact that he bought Twitter and has been revamping it. So I'm very appreciative for that. And we might actually be able to make a lot of progress and might turn some of this ridiculousness around. And it would be ironic that it came because of the very thing that kicked it off was this perversion and this lie, this great lie that Satan has been able to sell. So as I say, I think about those things. It's very sad to me that young confused people are paying the price for this lie. I don't even think I call it confusion. It's deliberate confusion. It's done on purpose. And it also brings me back to a quote that, again, this is something that I guess politics and these kind of social things make strange bedfellows, as they say. Maybe not the best phrase to use, but I didn't really used to agree with the lady that wrote the Harry Potter books, Rowling. I'm not ever sure how to pronounce that, but she had gotten into a bit of a spat with Mark Hamill, of all people. This is a celebrity spat, but she had put out this statement, and I agreed with it 100%. She said, the cure for gender dysphoria that children have, the cure for it is adolescence, is puberty, right? That's the thing that kids go through, and it's like a light bulb sometimes gets switched on, and kids just. So, there's a lot of interesting things that happen, but that's to me kind of a fascinating thing, and I guess maybe we've lost sight of that. Puberty really brings a lot of changes, physically, mentally, emotionally to kids, and when you give them these puberty blockers, you're stopping that process, and you're doing it in an abnormal way, in a non-normal way. So it's evil. It really is very much evil. It's kind of like the doctors used to do lobotomies. We used to do all kinds of just terrible things, and maybe they didn't know any better. Electroshock therapy, that sort of thing. And I don't know, maybe there is a place for some of this stuff, maybe a more refined version of it. But I know that doctors, and I'm fully 100% of this opinion, especially given what we've known, what has transpired in the last few years, that doctors don't really understand how the body works. I think they have just a very, very cursory sort of an understanding of how the body works, but it's very blunt. And, you always think of a surgeon operating with a scalpel, but, in reality, what they're doing medically is more like operating with a chainsaw or a sledgehammer. That's what I think of what surgeons are able to do or doctors are doing to the human body, as opposed to what, God has done with it. I mean, we are finely tuned, well-crafted machines, if you will, but we are designed for sure. And when we go in and we start, sticking our grubby paws into the machinery, when we start, the sabotage from the French word sabot, shoe, they would stick their shoes in the gears. That's what doctors are doing. And they don't know what they're doing. They don't know. And the kids are paying a price, and people should go to jail. They really should be prosecuted for this sort of stuff. So anyway.
It's tough on parents that have children like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know firsthand, one of my son-in-law's younger boy is that way.
Yeah.
And he says all he can do is pray for him every day, that he don't know anything else to do.
Yeah. Well, I know the thing not to do, and the thing not to do is to encourage it with, chemicals or, to try and alter someone physically, getting surgery, cutting off body parts.
Well, he dresses like a girl sometimes and carries a pocketbook around.
Yeah.
And he's even went so far as to supposedly got engaged to another guy.
Uh-huh.
Had it posted on Facebook and all that stuff.
It's really sad.
Said he's embarrassed about it. Said the only thing he knows to do is just pray all the time.
It certainly doesn't. It certainly doesn't hurt. I mean, we ought to pray for all these people, and that's the thing, and that's what I say is that I think a large majority of this comes from the grooming, the other people that get involved that encourage this type of behavior. I think a lot of these kids just grow out of that if it's not encouraged, if it's not, if it's, again, grooming is the key word here.
Well, they tried to say his part was hereditary because before my daughter married him, he was married to another lady, and that's what actually busted up their marriage. He came in from work one day and caught her with another woman. So that's what got their divorce. And now the doctors try to say, well, that's how come he's that way. He got it from her.
It's not. I don't believe at all that it is genetic.
That's hard to figure out.
And even if, and we've made this statement many times before, even if it were genetic, I mean, you might could say that, theft is a genetic issue, that people are predisposed to stealing things, to kleptomania. That doesn't mean you have to do it. So, and, the Bible speaks of this, there are people that, Jesus said there are people who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. You don't have to engage in these acts that are sinful. And so, as much as it might hurt, and, as much as it might grieve me to not, eat a piece of cake or do something else that I really enjoy. I mean, if I'm trying to be good, I will do that. If I'm trying to achieve an objective, and if our objective is to get to heaven, well, that's a much more important objective, I think, than to validate things in the flesh here. Our flesh fails us. There are so many people that are born that have, defects, they can't walk perhaps. And those are definitely, you can't deny that people are born with those kind of hardships, but, they overcome them usually. Most people, you see all these wonderful stories about people that are born without an arm, born without legs, and yet they learn how to adapt. They learn how to cope. But, we don't make society revolve around making those people feel like there's nothing at all wrong with them. They generally try to adapt to what is the norm. So again, and you're talking about, these are practical issues. This isn't even a spiritual issue when it comes to a physical handicap like that. When you're talking about, sin, there's no excuse for, having an affair on your spouse. That itself is inexcusable. It doesn't matter who you're attracted to. It doesn't matter what you're attracted to. The fact is, you made marriage vows, and it's incumbent on you to carry through with those marriage vows. It's a contract. It's the most important contract, actually. It's one that, God has ordained, the marriage contract. And so, and again, then you get into that, well, that's why we object to so-called, gay marriage, homosexual marriage, because it's not ordained by God. It's not a contract that you can actually enter into legitimately. It's fake. It's phony. And so it's very sad to see those kind of situations, but there are so many people that they can't leave that sin behind, no matter what it is. And it doesn't have to be a sexual sin. It could be, it could be greed. It could be anger, any number of things that could cause us to sin. And the fact that we're not willing to, pluck out that eye, that we're willing to, cut off that hand in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, then that is something that has to be laid at the individual's feet. That is something that, that is not something that you can blame anybody else for. Ultimately, it is at the feet of the person who has decided that their soul is not worthwhile enough to save it. You know what I'm saying? And again,
when they do turn it around, and a good example of that, I know a man at Tallapoosa for years and years, and he came forward one Sunday and said that he had a problem with gambling.
Yeah.
And said he was driving miles and miles away to buy lottery tickets just to keep from running into anybody he knows.
Yeah.
And said then one morning he realized about how far we got, God was still seeing him.
Yeah. That's a great point. You can't escape God. You cannot get away from God's judgment. It doesn't matter how fast or how far you travel. And, we've lost sight of that. And, there are so many people that don't think it's even a sin. It's a lifestyle choice. And so we're just going to make it, we're going to make people feel comfortable in their lifestyle choices. But it's a sad, sad existence. It really is. It is abnormal. And it does not lead to happiness any more than, eating food leads to happiness. There's no physical thing that's going to, make you happy ultimately. It's not going to ever be fulfilling. The only thing that is truly fulfilling is spiritual fulfillment, right? It doesn't matter. And you go back and you can read was it Solomon? You can read Ecclesiastes, right? And you look at all of the things that, all of the worldly things that he chased after, and yet ultimately it was all vanity, right? It was all pointless. It's all useless. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's just sad because people are so fully invested in the here and now. That's all they care about. But it's been drilled into them for decades and decades and decades that's all you've got is the here and now. So you just need to go for the gusto. We always use those trite phrases, right? The old beer commercials. But it's true. That's what people have been enticed to do. Be happy right now because that's it. For tomorrow we die. Eat, drink, and be merry. And, wear a dress or whatever floats your boat, whatever makes you happy. But it doesn't. It ultimately is not fulfilling. And most of these people, that's why there's such a high suicide rate for people like this. And it's not because people make fun of them. In fact, that's usually not the case. I mean, most of these people, they're just, we beg and we plead and we pray for them. And it's not that. It's the lifestyle. It's the intrinsically knowing that there's something more. We yearn internally, spiritually for meaning. And then when we reject God, what's left? It's just the physical things of this world that we try to put in that emptiness inside. And it never is enough because it's a physical thing that you can't put into a spiritual need. You can't feed a spiritual need with the physical things of this world because they're all fleeting. We're fleeting. I mean, our bodies are decaying every moment, and that's becoming more and more clear to me as time goes by. My body's falling apart. And so now you're kind of like, man, I sure wish I'd have, done more years ago, but I was laying around watching TV. I should have been doing more when I had, a body that could go and do more. So we're decaying, but so the thing we've got to remember is the spiritual life that is waiting for us on the other side. And, it's not just everlasting life that we have to look forward to. It's the everlasting death that we have to avoid. So, it's not just that, well, I don't care about, living forever. And there's not a choice. It's not, either heaven or nothing. It's a very big dichotomy. It's a very stark choice. So, again, people just don't realize it, or they don't want to realize, they don't want to acknowledge it. And that's the kind of fight that we're in right now, is getting people to remember the things. And that's what we've been talking about on Wednesday night in this book. If I can get back to the screen. I have trouble sometimes. It's aggravating because the little clicker. Come on, clicker. There it goes. So this is the book we're studying. This is What If Jesus Had Never Been Born? And we've talked about all the many terrible things that have gone on in history before Jesus, and how Jesus being here on the earth and setting the example that he did, and creating the church, how that has shaped our world now and how much better things are. So we've been talking about sexuality, and we won't go over all this. I got to get to the end of it. But basically, you can see from the slides here, Satan's lies. And of course, that's still going on today. And that's kind of what I alluded to at the beginning. These are the lies of the devil. I can just be whatever gender I want to be. Of course, we have lessons from history. There are plenty of empires that have risen and fallen, it seems that, and you can ask most historians, that the closer you get to the fall of a society, the more sexually, liberal they become, the more sexually deviant they become. And of course, we talked about that, eroticism in the ancient world. That was a big part of a lot of these pagan people's lives. I mean, that was the focus. That was their spirituality. And again, it's kind of interesting how today that same thing is mirrored in our society. You have the sexuality is what is worshipped. We worship the cult of homosexuality or bisexual, whatever. We worship at that. It's almost a holy thing these days. They say, well, gay love is better than heterosexual love somehow. I've heard that people actually say that, but it's just propaganda. The love is love crowd, but love is not love. There are different types of love. There's brotherly love. There's the kind of love that God has for us. And then there's the type of love that they're talking about, which is just the coarse base sort of eroticism, which really isn't love, is lust. So anyway, it's just interesting how everything old is new again. Is that what you want to say? We talked about the sanctity of sex, the effect that Christian ethic has on sex. And then we talked a bit about anti-sex heresies. This is going the opposite way. You have certain organizations like the Catholic Church that would forbid people to marry, and Jesus said that would happen. I mean, he said just straight up that would happen, and then they did it. It always kind of floors me when people read in the Bible. Jesus said there are people coming that are going to say things that are completely wrong, and here's what it is they're going to tell you to do. And then these people that are supposedly the keepers of this knowledge, the ones who are teaching other people, the ones that are the only ones qualified, as the Catholic Church said and still says, tell you that thing that Jesus said was going to be said that's wrong. It floors me. But anyway, we talked about that, and that's just as bad. Sex exists for a reason, and it is part of the marriage. That is part of the institution of marriage. That is the thing that God said for Adam and Eve, go and, go forth and multiply, populate the earth. That's what we're supposed to do. The man and the woman, they leave their parents, they come together, they cleave, they bond as one flesh, figuratively, literally, spiritually, I guess, and they produce offspring. That's not always the case. Sometimes that's just, for whatever environmental reasons or whatever, but that is the ideal, right? That is the ideal. One man, one woman for life. They have children, form a family. That family then is also one of the cornerstones of the church. We want to have strong families in the church. That builds up the church. There's nothing worse than you see a family that's split, and you have one person goes to, one church and one goes to another. That's always a bad thing.
I heard something today. It just never occurred to me. It was so obvious once it was said. Mm-hmm. It was an interview some time ago between Tucker Carlson and J.D. Vance, and Vance was talking about people. I think you had people like Kamala in mind and others of that nature, the elite ruling class.
Yeah.
And he was making the point they're not family oriented. He said they're all a bunch of childless cat women. Of course, he's taking a lot of flack for that statement. But what he meant
was true.
I never thought about it. The people who want to be the masterminds and tell us how to live don't put a value on child raising, or they don't put any value on the family at all. Their goals are completely other. And I guess once you see it, it's like it's been staring all along. But that is where the real divide is between the far left and the conservative traditionalists.
Mm. And as you can tell, that's pretty much the social media, the media push in the last couple of days is, how great and wonderful it is to be, this young party girl that, that the vice president is purported to be. And that's really all that is, that's the thing that you need to aspire to in this world is just,
You talk about a man and woman getting closer to one another. I recall a little thing that Aaron Stife told us one time in Tallapoosa. He said if a man and a woman are both going up, and you getting closer to Christ, as they get closer to God, they're getting closer to each other.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of like a triangle, and that to me is again, that's why it's the ideal. That's why God has the institution of marriage. I think it's, the angels don't get married. I mean, Jesus said that, right? There's no giving in marriage in heaven. There's no need. Number one, the angels are, literally created beings. So they're not procreated beings like we are. So, sex in this world has a purpose spiritually. It is to create, more human beings, more children of God. And so for that reason, it is to be held in the highest regard. It's what is it? I want to say sanctimonious. It's sacrosanct. It's a holy thing, really, because you're engaging in it in a relationship that God has ordained, right? So marriage is ordained, and that's the only proper relationship in which you can have proper sexual relations is in a marriage, right? And what is the result of that relationship, that sexual relationship? Well, hopefully it's children, not all the time, not every time, but hopefully that is the goal. That, of course, that's why the Catholics, they ended up having a lot of kids, because they encourage that. And we should do that too, honestly. We should encourage people to continue to have kids. That's part of the reason we're in such a pickle now.
Going back to Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
I've heard her make in one of her speeches where she did list as, she's got this Green New Deal thing. She's all about protecting the planet. That population control was she literally said that was one of the things she was after, was reducing the population. So it all goes back to this, taking the kids are being sterilized is basically what you were saying in the beginning. That's what's happening. They don't want us to have children.
That is the exact point, and I do not, for the life of me, I don't understand. I mean, I can understand from a philosophical point, the point of the Marxist, not wanting the people that are smart to reproduce because we want to bring in the people that are dumb. I can understand that, but I can't understand people that willingly, well, I'm not going to have kids because, Ron and I mean, we had a conversation, many times we talk about, man, you really hate to bring kids into this world. It's so horrible. It's so terrible. But the end of that conversation was always, but it's always been pretty bad. It's like, and the conversations we were having, a couple of decades ago about that, the world is like a lot worse. And yet it's still a great and wonderful thing. I mean, there's nothing that these people are going to do. There's nothing that Satan's going to do that's going to completely diminish the beauty of this world and all of the things that God has created. I mean, it's a minor irritant, really, when you get down to it. All the things that these evil people are doing to us. In the grand scheme of things, I still have a wonderful family. I've got wonderful kids, a wonderful wife. I can enjoy all of these things. We can be good to each other. We can be, Christians. We can continue to worship God. Those are the important things. It doesn't really matter what, all these other weirdos are doing out there. We can still resist on our own way. We can still live our lives the way God wants us to live. Nobody has done, the only thing that they came close to doing that with was COVID, when they told us not to come to church, when they got just, that far away from coming and putting, chains on the doors. But, we complied, because we were, trying to be good. And see, they always do that, don't they? They say, well, you'd be a good citizen if you'll just comply with our, not coming to church thing. And so anyway, we're never going to fall for that monkey business again. But again, it doesn't matter. All these people out here acting crazy, all these people we're talking about, it's a fight to be fought, but that should never even come into the equation of whether we should, get married, have kids, and, continue to do what God has commanded us to do. We should never let any of this stuff interfere with that. And so I don't understand. I don't understand why people voluntarily say, well, I'm just not going to have kids because it's good for the planet. What does that even mean? Like, the planet does not think. The planet has no...
I don't even think that's the real reason.
No, I don't think so either. Well, are they wanting us to not have kids for what? If nobody has kids, then there'll be no people left. There'll be no kids to have a planet for.
If they're saying that, well, if their mom and daddy talked that way, they wouldn't be here.
Well, and sadly, I've seen people talking about abortion, for instance, and they'll say things like, well, sometimes I think, I wish my mom had had an abortion, talking about themselves. That's the state of the world that we are living in, that people are that, and it really does. It comes down to a mental illness epidemic that we have because we don't address it. We don't have the courage to stand up and call sin. We don't stand up to people that have obvious mental deficiencies, mental illnesses, and try and get them help. I mean, even the so-called experts now, they don't define the cross-dressing and all. They don't define that as being abnormal anymore. It's insane. It's absolutely insane how far we have come in just the last 10 or 20 years. All of a sudden the scientists, are saying, well, gender it's a fluid thing. It's, one day you might wake up and you feel 80% like a woman and 20% like a man. So, I mean, these are serious people that we're supposed to take seriously. These are people that have degrees. They have all kinds of letters after their name, and we're supposed to look to them for guidance. And they're falling off a cliff. And if we follow after them, we're going to go too. It's just, and I don't know, maybe we're too nice. Maybe we've been too nice and too polite. Down here in the South, we don't like to get too ugly. We like, even when people are treating us bad, you get bad service at the restaurant, you still, give them a little bit of slack. Well, they weren't that bad. I guess I'll leave them a tip anyway, that kind of thing. But, maybe we shouldn't be that way. Maybe we should be more direct when it counts. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't be nice, but I'm saying, when somebody's doing something wrong, when they're doing something that is sinful, especially, maybe we should say something and not just be nice.
We should, but that is being nice. I know what you mean.
Yeah, that is being nice ultimately. Well, they don't seem to see it that way, though. They get all... Yeah. Well, and maybe that's part of the problem too. We don't spank them anymore. But I can't spank. I mean, I can't speak other people's kids. Anyway, I know what you mean. I mean, it is definitely, it is the more loving thing, and you hear that too. You hear that said quite a bit. The loving thing to do is to correct the person and to help them. The many examples that I know Philip's given us. Trying to flag down people that are heading towards a bridge that's out, kind of a thing, we need to warn them. The loving thing is not to just watch them and wave to them as they careen off of the edge of the bridge. Jump in front, whatever you got to do to warn them. But, unfortunately, it's not, to them, they don't see that the bridge is out. I mean, they can't see it, because they don't believe that there's even a bridge. I don't believe in God. I don't believe there's such a thing as sin. So that's kind of that's unfortunately the groundwork that we got to lay again. We're having to, rebuild all these structures, philosophically, that people have just jettisoned in the past, few decades. But of course, that can be traced back probably to public education in a lot of ways, and the lack of parenting. It really does. It comes down to that. If you're not strict with your kids, if you're not bringing them to church constantly, they're gonna forget. they're just not going to do it. It's not going to be important because they see that it really wasn't that important to you. Anyway, I'm treading old ground here. So, the anti-sex heresies are just as bad as the way too much outside of God's boundary sex. We talked about whether the Christian view of sex is repressive or not. We would not say that. In fact, we have a very healthy view of sex. I mean, there's nothing in the world wrong with sex as long as it is in the context of a marriage, of a proper marriage. It is perfectly, it's encouraged. God encourages that. We're supposed to do that. Yes, sir?
God created us more or less perfect
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, and He gave us rules to go by. He gave us families to propagate the population throughout the world and
Mm-hmm.
bring more Christians and more souls to Him. But man doesn't want to listen to those who know better than they do. They want to be God themselves, and so they twist whatever they want to twist in order to make it work for them. So some people, they know better, but they don't intend to do better because they want to be their own God.
It kind of makes me think, and I know people like this. I work with people like this, and I'm sure you've known, or maybe you've worked with people like this, that it doesn't matter what you say, they're just going to disagree with it, right? It doesn't matter, you can say the sky's blue, no, it's not. It looks more like it's red to me. Just why? Why do you have to be so cantankerous? Why do you have to just say the opposite all the time? There's just, like, why can't you just get along sometimes? But you see somebody like that, and that's what a lot of these atheists are. They're just, whatever God said, I'm going to do the exact opposite because I hate God that much. I just absolutely despise even the very concept of God. So whatever it is that God supposedly said that was made up by all these other, so-called religious people, it was all done for their benefit. And so, forget them. I'm going to do the exact opposite. Yes, sir?
Betty just commented to me that if I'm not being cantankerous, if I disagree about the color of the sky, I'm colorblind. So
Yeah. I understand. We'll give you a little leeway there.
I didn't say college blind. I said colorblind.
Or we and then
He killed me today, right? He's talking about Kamala went to a college sorority instead of hearing Netanyahu speak today.
oh yeah.
And they blamed him for saying colored sorority. He said college kind of quick.
Oh.
So they're all jumping colored sorority.
There was another one of those. There was another guy on the TV. He was, I forget what station it was on, but it was making the rounds today too. And he was saying that some people thought he said that the government tried to assassinate Trump. Said the government tried to, but he was saying gunmen, I think. But some people, it's like that dress picture that they had a while back. Some people said it was blue, some people said it was pink or whatever. It's one of those things where it sounded to me like he said the gunman tried to kill Trump, but some people are saying that he said the government tried to kill Trump. I think it's probably the same thing at some level. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to be too political, but and then adultery, of course, not being a private affair. Of course, it's not. It often becomes public, but it doesn't just hurt. It's not a victimless crime. They say that sort of thing. It is a victimless crime. Right? It is not. You're violating, God's law. It's a crime against God, really. And that's why I think that, divorce is so bad. You're breaking that contract that God has created. You're breaking your agreement with God, not just with your wife or your husband. So I think that's definitely true. And then we talked about homosexuality, and we talked about, it's not just Christians or religious types that say this kind of stuff. But of course, God does say that homosexuality is wrong. And we talked last week about the fact that some people say, well, Jesus never really condemned homosexuality. He never really. But they ignore the fact that and of course this is his statement. He didn't come to destroy God's law. He came to fulfill it, and of course that expressly condemns homosexuality, right? But not only that is, and I brought up this point, and again we won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but Jesus came to, he was kind of the original restoration. Well, one of, I guess there were some Old Testament prophets that were restorationists, right? But Jesus was a restorationist in that, he would come to the Jewish nation. He said, look, just for the hardness of your heart, for instance, Moses allowed you to put your wives away, but from the beginning it was not so. So he was here to correct the record. He was here to say, this is what God wants. And, we've let you slide so far with some of these things, but, this is what God really intended. And not just that, but here I'm going to go a step further. And it's not an eye for an eye anymore. It's turn the other cheek. It's, be good to those that persecute you. So it was it was a changing of some of these laws. Now, having said that, if God had changed his mind on homosexuality, you think Jesus would have said that, right? You would think he would have said, oh, and yeah, by the way, the thing with, stoning homosexuals, that we've changed our mind on that. But of course, that's not at all the case. Of course, we don't stone homosexuals anymore. We don't stone people for committing acts of sin. Maybe murder every once in a while if you can get a lethal injection, but it's still a sin. Homosexuality, adultery, all these things are still sins, even if they're not against the law. So that has not changed. God has always been against it because it's a perversion. It's a perversion of the natural order. It's a perversion of the marriage union that he set up from the beginning. And homosexuality is a mockery of that. And I've said that before. These so-called homosexual marriages, it is a direct mockery of God's marriage, of the institution that he set up, and I don't know any other way to put it. Anyway, so it is wrong to say that, God has changed his mind, that Jesus changed any kind of doctrine as far as that's concerned. And now, it's not just the acceptance of it out in public, but there are a lot of churches, and we've seen that recently, have we not? The Methodist Church, weren't they the ones that recently had that big rule change, and they allow, female ministers, I think they've had that, but, openly homosexual men and women to be so-called pastors. And that's caused a big problem in the Methodist Church, as well it should. And unfortunately, I wish we'd see some people come over to our way of thinking and come to visit us. I think we've tried to make inroads, but there's so many people, they're so ingrained in their denominationalism that they're not going to leave it. So they either stick with it and think, well, I'm just going to, soldier on in this church that's, left me, or I think they tried to start another version of the Methodist Church. So anyway, people are just so entrenched in that way of thinking. And even when the denomination that is wrong to begin with completely abandons them, they still won't let go. They still won't. Well, maybe if they were wrong on this, maybe they were wrong on some of this other stuff like baptism.
That's what we wish we could get them to see, is that this is just one issue. There have been and there will be others like it. It's the very structure of the United Methodist Church, which is not unlike a number of denominations, that will allow this sort of thing to continue to happen. So even though you might be able to bite the bullet on this one, just tolerate it or look the other way, the very structure of the United Methodist Church, the way it's set up with the bishops and the hierarchy, will allow this to happen because it ends up being a rival authority to Scripture. They don't take Scripture on. Wish we could get them to see that. We were hoping to have had a big push this summer, a big campaign to emphasize that very point, but it just has not materialized yet for some reason.
Well,
people who are behind it and see if we can encourage them not to be discouraged.
Well, and sadly, we've invited folks to come and visit, And, we thought that the iron was, hot and ready to strike. And unfortunately, one of the particular people I'm thinking of just kept, there's always something else that, well, I can't come this time. I can't come that time. Just something always seemed to come up at the last minute. So you kind of wonder, I mean, I don't want to, I'm not questioning people's motives or anything, but I think people let excuses, I think people let things be excuses for them not wanting to change their ways, and so they just, well, it's kind of raining hard, so I can't come when they really could. I'm sorry. I don't mean anything when I say that if somebody's not here because they legitimately can't be here because it's raining. But, some people, they feel a raindrop and, I don't think I'll sleep in today. Yes, sir.
You don't want to do something, you'll make up your own rules to keep from doing it.
And I think that is the case. I really do. And I'm going to get done with this. I'm ramming this through. This is where we got to last week. This is the new stuff. So there's only a couple of more slides left. So he talks about the fruit of the sexual revolution. I was going to say it kind of looks like fruit, but that's not fruit. That's gonorrhea, and that's chlamydia. So the picture may not be. That's kind of an awkward one. So what has the sexual revolution with its acceptance of homosexuality and its promotion of promiscuity brought us, he says? Beyond the psychological and sociological damage we discussed previously, there are 26 sexually transmitted diseases that are epidemic in this population. And now this was 30 years ago that he's writing this book now, so I don't know. There's probably some new ones that, stuff keeps cropping up. So.
But these statistics are even newer, right?
Yeah, this is a different slide. Yeah, this is a slide that's modern. So yeah, you can see the numbers there. He says, in fact, and this is back then when he's writing this, but 1 in 5 Americans has some type of viral STD. And I don't know if that stat's given on here. I don't know if there's a similar stat, but anyway, you can see the total cases in 2018. That's a lot of people. That's not as many illegal immigrants as we have in the country, but it's still a big number, So he says, back then, according to this new study back then, 56 million Americans are, quote, infected with a sexually transmitted viral disease like herpes or hepatitis B. Now, those are things that don't ever go away, right? Those are things that just are always there. So those are forever kind of diseases. He said in 2001, Surgeon General David Satcher reported that some 12 million Americans are infected by sexually transmitted diseases each year. Worldwide, more than 100 million cases of gonorrhea alone. Now that I could definitely believe, especially in some of these third world countries. It's just horrible. It's horrible, the things that they do. I was told, I don't know. You don't know the veracity of some of these things, but you know what? I'm not even going to say it. It's just too horrible. I'm not even going to say the kind of things that they get up to in these third world nations. But anyway, it's bad. He says that it's been shown that there are people walking around our streets who not only have AIDS, but 3 or 4 or 5 of these other diseases as well. A person has to be insane to do such things as would get them infected in a day like today. And that was 30 years ago, and now it's even worse. Of course, he talks about the devastation that AIDS had wrought on the homosexual community. Still does. Although I'm told, I read a lot of stuff, I guess. Maybe I should stay off of the internet, but that's kind of a thing that some homosexual men strive to do, is to get AIDS. And I don't know exactly how true that is, but I would not doubt it. But again, he says you have to be crazy to do the things that they do, and yet I guess for some of them it's a badge of honor. He says back then the average married man in America lives to be 74 years of age. The average homosexual dies at 43. This is the tragic natural consequence of their unnatural acts, which God has clearly told us to avoid. And it doesn't say, why, what is the cause of it, but I imagine it runs the gamut between disease and perhaps self-harm. So he says, so maybe God isn't such an ogre after all. You hear about this and you think, well, maybe it is a good idea to be chaste, to be in a monogamous relationship, right? You think maybe that's actually not a bad thing, which we've been told, since the 70s, nah, man, you gotta be a hippie. Probably the basic lie of Satan underlying all of his deceptions is that the laws of God will restrict and narrow and diminish one's life. How many people have sadly learned that just the opposite is true when their bodies have been, vitiated is his word, ravaged, I guess you could say, by venereal disease, or their minds have been scrambled by various guilt-induced psychoses, neuroses, even, especially today, this gender dysphoria stuff. And they found only too late that if they had followed God's path, their life would have been enriched and ennobled. The problem is that in America, we have confused love with lust, and I agree with that 100%. And these are all almost antithetically opposed to each other. Think about that. I think it's a good point. Lust and love are like antithetical to one another. The essence of lust is a desire to get something from someone else. Love is the opposite. For God so loved, he gave, the idea being. The principle of love is, as it is operative in marriage, works out like this, or operative in marriage. It produces an intense desire to make life for another the finest experience possible. Do you love your husband, your wife? If so, your daily conscious desire is to make life for her or him the finest experience possible in every sphere, in every area. Isn't that right, Rhonda? I know, it is right. I agree. Sorry.
Is the audio working?
Yeah, it's working tonight. Maybe she'll watch it later. So anyway, and I agree with that. Do you not agree? I think that's probably true of all of us. When we got married, that was the thing we were concentrating on. We wanted to, want to get married. We wanted to have a good job so we could support our wife. We wanted to be a good wife to our husband. We wanted to raise kids. I mean, I would just say probably everybody in this building probably was of that mind. Unfortunately, it's not that way anymore. It's more of what Philip just talked about, the thing that they're pushing now. The cat ladies, the people that are childless, and it's not just the women. We're not picking on them. I've seen so many times, how much better it is. Life is so much better if you don't have kids. You and your spouse, you just go on trips and you just live a carefree life. You don't have to worry about a babysitter. You don't have to worry about, Rhonda gave me a thumbs up, by the way. I guess she must have been watching. I don't know why she's watching. But anyway, the thing is, that she made me lose my train of thought now. We've been programmed, we've been told that, there's all there is this world. But children are not something I consider to be of this world. My children are not just physical beings. I mean, they're spiritual beings. They are, little angels. I mean, and maybe not literally, but I mean, they're made in God's image. They are souls, they're precious souls. And so, when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, how much richer is your life? You got your wife, that's great. But I mean, you're introducing new souls into this world. You're assisting with that process. And now you've got a group of souls, and it just is so cool. It's so cool to have kids and to raise kids and to see them get older and mature. And thankfully, I mean, I just can't tell you how overjoyed I was, when, Garrett got baptized and then Reagan got baptized. It's just the best thing in this world. And there is nothing more. Like, I feel like, I told Rhonda, we were going up there, I said, I feel like, it's kind of mission accomplished. Like I've done, if I do nothing else in my life, I have contributed in some small way to that outcome. And so as far as the kids are concerned, no matter what they do in life, they can be bums the rest of their life as long as they're faithful Christians. That's all I'm going to ask of them. That's all I can possibly ask of them. And that's the highest thing for you to aspire to in this life. What's that? Grandkids. And grandkids are even better. If my kids are listening, if my children are listening, then, before I'm dead, we'd like to have some, but not too soon. So anyway, this is the last slide. I got to get through this. Are we just starting the Thursday night thing next week? I mean, Thursday is the first night of August.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not doing this Wednesday. So
finish.
I've got to finish. So I'm here. I'm there. I'm at the end. God wants what's best for us. And what's better than that? You see that picture? I mean, didn't that look cool? I mean, that's what you want. I don't want to see, some sad sack, some old lady drinking her glass of wine, enjoying her cats. No, that's the thing. That is, there's nothing better in the world than having family. There's just nothing better than that. God wants us to have the very best, but as we've seen, the modern enlightened secularist believes that religious people, Christian people, are repressed. They don't have sexual freedom. They don't know how to enjoy the sexual side of their lives. They need to throw off the Lord and his ways. Red Book, see, that's what I hate getting into this stuff because it's kind of spicy, I guess, maybe. Red Book magazine conducted a survey concerning sex in modern liberated America. They listed questions they wanted women to respond to. To their astonishment, 100,000 readers responded. They'd never seen anything vaguely approaching that before. The largest survey like this ever taken, and 100,000 American women responded to a secular magazine that told of their sex lives. What did the survey reveal? Even more astounding than the number of women that replied were the results. They discovered that women who are, quote unquote, sexually liberated, the feminists, the free modern women, are the most dissatisfied in that regard. The only women less satisfied are women who like to very prolific in their sexual escapades, who are so frustrated in that way that they run from here to there, back and forth everywhere, trying to find some satisfaction with just whoever that they can have an encounter with. But the more religious women indicated that they had much more satisfaction in their lives sexually. The most religious category, women were to judge how much a part religion played in their lives. So it was a self-reporting kind of a thing. But the most religious category, whom the average enlightened American male has been told by the devil are sexually repressed, were the most satisfied with their lives. I'm really having to tone down. He's used a lot of spicy language here, but that tracks with everything we know, because sex inside of a marriage is the most wonderful. You don't worry about any diseases. You're not concerned about any other people being in the picture. I'm trying to be as cautious as I can with my language, but living the way God has prescribed for us to live brings us the most joy. And especially in that area, because it is sanctioned, right? And sex inside of marriage is the best because that's the way God designed it to be, right? And it's the worst outside of marriage because it's being abused, it's being used. That is the worst thing that you can ever do, is to use something that God has given us to be used for a specific purpose and to misuse it and to abuse it in a way that is not supposed to be used. So again, it's very interesting to see this kind of result because it goes completely contrary, to the way that, most modern, feminists would say, well, you shouldn't have kids. You shouldn't stay at home. You should have a job. You should just be like a man. That's going to bring you pleasure. But that's not how God designed us. And so they're always just, they're terribly, usually these people that have jobs, they hate them, I don't want to go in and work on a job, why would, if I could be a wife and stay at home and raise the kids, I think I'd probably jump at that opportunity if I could. Anyway, living the way God wants us to live is by far the best. So he says, have you believed that lie? Tens of millions have. Who really cares about your happiness? The devil? You think the devil cares about your happiness? Oh, the devil would love for you to have all of these diseases we saw on the screen a little while ago. He'd love for you to have them all at once, he says. Or to be, pregnant out of wedlock. Or God. God's banner over us is love. His way is the way of fulfillment, not the way of repression. So he sums all this up. He says, our focus in this chapter has been on the sanctity of the marriage bed, but a lot more could be said about Christianity's other contributions to the family. Above all, applied Christian living does wonders for family living, as millions of happy families can testify. God's principles for a happy home, as stated in the Bible, are the blueprints for a loving family. Take Christ out of these homes, and many of them will fall apart. Many marriages have been healed, however, by a commitment to Christ first and to each other second. And that always works so very well when you don't just consider that contract between, you and your spouse, but also that God is there in the midst of this Christ. Let's see. I'm going to skip over that part. I think that's it. The conclusion, the last summation here, very short. Had Jesus not come, far more people would continue to act like the pagans, many of whom have no control over their urges. What would have happened to the human race if sexual diseases had been left unchecked to wipe out large segments of the population? In short, if Jesus Christ had not been born, you might not have been born either. I think there's something to be said for that. There are all kinds of terrible things that happen. Child sacrifice. And of course, we know what is happening now with the child sacrifice of our day, abortion. And that is, there's just not enough people. We're not repopulating the earth at an amount that is sufficient to support us. As the population is aging out, there's not enough people coming up behind to take over. And we're seeing that. You see, there's not enough people now to work at the fast food places, that's just a small little minuscule thing to make note of. That's an unimportant thing to take note of. But, if we don't step it up and start having more kids, then we're in serious trouble as a society in general. But not just having kids, but we need to be having kids within the nuclear family. We need to be raising them with God's oversight. Yes, sir? Oh, okay. All right, well, that's it. I got to quit now, so let me